our broadcast, and I'll look for if there's anybody in the audience that needs to be migrated. So we are live.
So this is the planning board meeting of the 3rd of September, 2025. We'll start with roll call. Brian Balcom, not here. Jen Bluestein, not here. Alden Clark, not here. Charlie Palmisano,
Here.
here. Jamie Pennington,
Here.
Rick Tainter,
Here.
Jack LeCaire,
Jack is here.
Matt Heffron,
Here.
and I am here.
Pleasure.
Okay, we just have general business on the agenda tonight. The first item listed is approval of minutes, but for the 20th of August, but those have not been distributed yet, so we're going to hold on that and hopefully get to that at our next meeting. Second item on the agenda, which I think we will spend the rest of our time on tonight, is our comments and folded into a letter that we will forward to the Zoning Board of Appeals related to the Plaza Landings project. So what I have done is try to put a rough outline together of comments that we have heard in prior meetings. And Andy and I have put together a draft based upon that that we can review and hopefully sign off on tonight so that we can get that letter to the Zoning Board of Appeals prior to their next meetings, which Andy, I think the next meeting has to do with traffic.
Yeah,
And I think
agreed.
it's important that we get our comments to them as soon as we can.
Yeah, thank you. Do you mind if I just add a comment or two?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just like Bob said, he had tried to synthesize we had obviously discussed a little bit of this at the last meeting, and, he had attempted to sort of synthesize that. We sort of merged that together into sort of a letter with some narrative just to kind of flesh it out. It's good timing, in fact, because the Zoning Board of Appeals hearing, although it's being continued for a number of months, because it's a long permit timeframe. The board decided to hold off on some of the discussions related to traffic and as well as pedestrian bicycle circulation type stuff that is related to the intersection at Low Street, the driveway, and sort of wrapping around the building. So I mentioned that because some of the comments that you have seem to overlap with comments that have already been made in the record by the peer review consultant or others, essentially suggesting some, in addition to perhaps anything else here or otherwise, some site level improvements that could benefit, the environments where the building sort of intersects what is presently a lot of parking and asphalt. So at any rate, happy to defer to Bob and the board how you want to run through this in order to kind of avoid the problems associated with deliberations between meetings and having back and forth. That way, we consolidated as best we could and we're happy to go kind of, section by section, page by page, whatever, and either read that in the record if you want, or just kind of review the narrative yourself and see if we have covered everything, if there's something missing or something you'd like modified, so that, as Bob said, we could get that back to the ZBA, and they'll have time to digest those comments and take them into account, in parallel with other things that might be overlapping with that traffic discussion on the 23rd and then beyond that. And also the applicant will be able to see those comments as well. Again, part of that record, and we'll be able to perhaps respond to those concerns as well, which again, like I said, overlap with other comments. So sorry to go so long-winded, but I thought that was helpful context.
So I think just to sort of walk through this for a second, the beginning of the letter is kind of creating some context for this project relative to the overall Story Avenue development and the overlay zoning that we will be looking at as we begin to discuss that over the next year or so. So this is just, and Andy, you can kind of go into this in a little bit more detail, but it basically puts the Plaza Landings project in the context of future discussions about the Story Avenue district. And I think we all want to talk about, how this project relates to that future development, how it can at least address conditions at the perimeter of the current Plaza Landing site that can then lead us to, logical expansion of all of this development as we go forward. So this first paragraph, actually second paragraph with the heading Plaza Landings, Kmart Development and Long-Term Vision for the Surrounding Area, that's intended to create that context for the overall project. So does anyone have any questions or want to have any further discussion about that? If not, we can kind of move on to the bullet points and begin talking about our specific comments related to Plaza Landings.
I guess my only question would be, I know we talked a lot about in the past when Rick and Alden kind of went back and forth about reading some of these things into the record. But given how long this document is, can we just simply reference the letter, or is it prudent to read it in?
Oh, no, that's fine. It's not, that this is fine here. We can skim through the document and comment on the things that are relevant to where you'd like tweaks and whatnot. We don't need to read the whole text, so to speak. I was just offering that if it's helpful for anybody for any reason, just in terms of sharing this. Normally we have documents we're seeing before a meeting, but because we can't have deliberation amongst the board about something like this, we're just trying to review the text and the narrative together here. And as Bob said, it's organized in bullets below so that each concept or issue that it seems like the planning board members wanted to identify and flag for the ZBA's consideration are covered by a bullet. So you can read each one at a time and, determine if it covers what we think we wanted to cover.
So I guess what I'd like to accomplish tonight is, are we as a board comfortable with the bullets listed? Are there any additional comments that we should include in this? And I'd like to get to the point where we have the chassis of a letter that Andy and I can finalize over the next day or so and get this onto the ZBA. So I think the best way to do this is, Andy, I think let's just go through it item by item.
Before we do that, so I wasn't clear. Have we seen this before? Should I have seen this before, or are we just seeing it now?
No, that was my point, is just because of the timing and putting this together and the nature of board members not having a lot of back and forth over a substantive nature, something that should be discussed in a public forum. As a body, we put together this narrative and thought it would make sense to give you time to review this text together as a group. We're hopeful that, the group can do that here during the meeting together and determine if it captures the general sense of issues you wanted to cover, areas you wanted to have flagged for the ZBA's consideration. That was the goal here. Understood that normally we might try to distribute something like applicant materials or peer review comments and things like that in advance of a meeting. So.
I guess just following up on that, I don't want to prejudge what we're going to talk about tonight, but we do have another meeting. We could do it. We could discuss it. If there's a lot of stuff that came up tonight, we could hold it up till our next meeting, and we still have plenty of time before the zoning board meeting, correct?
Agree, concur 100%. Again, like Bob said, there's benefit, as he mentioned, I would say just as planning director, it's beneficial to the other board and to the applicant and the process there that they have, because there's a statutory time frame. There's time frame it takes for consultants to do modifications on plans, for instance, to consider, changes. There is still benefit if the letter comes sooner, but you're correct. You could continue that discussion through a later meeting and just introduce that letter. We just obviously want to get that to them so that they have the full benefit of planning board comments as soon as you're able.
And I guess another option would be, if we didn't want to wait, if there's something comes up tonight that there's some discussion about, you and Andy and Bob could draft a revised letter and send it to the board, and the board could say yes, or we need more discussion, right? That wouldn't be a board deliberation if you just sent it out and said, if anybody wants to have further discussion, we will discuss at our next meeting. Otherwise, we'll move forward with this, correct?
Yeah, it would be helpful if we just structured it so that if anybody has any particular concerns, we just go with that it's back on the agenda. Rather than a sort of, me tallying it to a quorum via email, right? So at the end of the day, yeah, if we can just, flag if someone has a particular concern, maybe it goes back to the agenda if you all agree. Again, I don't have any particular preference myself. I defer to you as a board, how you want to handle this, from here forward. But just trying to, find a way to make it work mechanically without any issues. So that's all.
Yeah.
One question, what's the approximate timeline for the developer? What are they thinking?
I believe it's December 21st would be the date that the zoning board of appeals has to make a decision by, or issue a decision by. But there's several different lines of peer review and analysis, of the project that's being done. There's been requests for review by different departments of the city, some peer review consultants, and so those things are working their way into the cycle as well as additional public comment. And so I think traffic and that aspect of the project will be the most likely focus for folks, given what we know, and that is on the agenda for the 23rd of September. They have already preemptively scheduled a meeting for the following Tuesday, the 30th, recognizing that they'll probably want to continue that discussion another night, give it additional focus perhaps. So they've already assumed that there's 2 meetings that at the end of that month of September to do this. But again, it's beneficial if you're able to come to confidence with the comments that you have. The sooner they have that, the better it is for them as a board because they can digest those things. Again, you have to decide, when that is, if it has everything in here and how you want to handle that. Happy to defer to whatever that process is. Defer to you. I just note that, that process will end, ultimately speaking, December 21st, unless there's an extension, an exchange with the applicant based on back and forth over a few things where folks feel like they need to have more time.
Andy, do we know when the architectural review will happen?
That is expected to happen essentially in October. So we'll be able to share the comments that we get and sort of merge that discussion together. If you want to attend the ZBA meetings when that is being discussed with the consultants.
Yeah.
But in essence, that would follow the traffic, stormwater, civil review, which will be sort of the September month for this project.
Okay.
Sorry, did I miss anything?
No, don't think so.
Okay, so
But
that was
just,
just.
I mean, there's in this letter, I don't think there's anything in here that we haven't already discussed in our previous meetings. These are all comments that all of you have made, that I have tried to put together in a coherent form, so that we could talk about whether this is the collection of comments or whether there's additional comments or whether we want to edit what is in here right now. So all of this should look relatively familiar based upon our previous discussions.
Agreed completely. And that's why, we can essentially just go bullet by bullet if folks want, defer to you all.
Yeah,
Let's just dig into it, Andy.
perfect.
So anybody have any concerns about number 1 as written? Basically, considering normal review of typical items in relation to a development project. Yes, it's a 40B project, but that doesn't necessarily mean there aren't the normal considerations and best practices. So this is just making that clear as a starting point. Number 2, this
I have
is.
I have
Oh,
a
sorry, Guy.
question.
Yeah.
Is this letter being posted on the Zoom? Because I don't see it on my view here.
You should see a visual display of the letter, do you not?
I
I'm
don't.
seeing it.
It might be your view setting in Zoom. You can, I don't know how you're set up on your computer there, but there's usually a right-click buttons or settings, that you can navigate to that will allow you to see the display of whoever's presenting. So you should see a Word document right now.
I'm not. I'm just seeing you people. That's all.
You'll have to toggle your Zoom settings because it's each person on their individual computer controls that in Zoom. It
Yeah,
sounds
I'm
like
trying
you've
to
got
do
it-
that, but I'm not.
It sounds like you've got it set only to show the people and not the presenter's materials.
Wish I could help you, Jack. That's not my forte.
Jack,
Yeah.
on my computer, in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, is the word view.
Yeah,
View, yeah.
If you
I
click
see
on
a
that,
gallery up here and
don't do gallery, do standard. I
do
think.
standard.
standard.
Do you see a standard option?
Nope.
You
Okay,
click on
side by
view,
side.
you don't get a pull down menu.
Yeah, I see it, but I'm not seeing any choices that refer, just see speaker gallery, sort gallery.
Right,
No,
there's no side by side.
no, not seeing it.
Huh.
But go
Your-
ahead, go ahead.
Your
I'll
screen may
listen.
be bigger than
Yeah,
what's
I'm trying to
being
do that
shown.
too.
Maybe try the speaker, the one that says speaker. I don't know how it's worded in there, but I just
Side by side speaker.
So on my device, I have two little buttons at the bottom, and I can toggle between the two, but it's an Apple iPad. I don't know if that helps. I can change the view by those two buttons right below the pictures.
No, not seeing it, but go ahead. I'll listen up. It's all right.
okay. The second bullet is basically just noting that although the applicant may call out and say that certain things aren't relevant for review on a given project, in this case, either in the context of a 40B or because of the nature of the plans, they may not think it's relevant. And just, again, noting that the board should make its own determination on that, as well as its consultants and engineers that might be doing a peer review to make that determination for itself. I think that also goes to the waiver list, I guess. When the ZBA looks and determines whether or not to grant waivers for the project, they should make its own determination of that, recognizing the applicants going to put forward, there are sensible arguments for it, but the board should make its own conclusions one way or the other. So, and it also notes in here that stormwater management and offsite pedestrian and traffic mitigation are sort of those typical review considerations that one might expect.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And just pause me here as I'm going. Since EOHLC, which is the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, long acronym, received the applicant's pro forma, and so their sort of financial plan essentially for this project. It was noted that because the applicant here said it's not required for the ZBA's permit process and for a comprehensive permit, it was suggested here in this bullet or at the last meeting that that also being included in the public record for folks to have transparency on that front. The comprehensive permit regulations at the state level and the way that those are interpreted and applied, and the way the case law applies to that is, in essence, that the board can't require the pro forma as a submission requirement up front per se, but they can it can be sort of driven in later discussions with the developer or applicant as to whether or not they can be expected to do certain mitigation or improvements, meaning there's certain costs that are estimated to go with traffic improvements or something, and the developer comes back and says, it doesn't work for my pro forma, I can't do those improvements and make this the affordable housing aspect of this project work. So that's the point at which the pro formas are something that has to be submitted for the record in the permit process. I'm just breaking down for you briefly some of the minutiae of how the regulations work. But in effect, the board was just suggesting here, I think that it'd be beneficial to transparency for that information to also be provided, and it was essentially already given to the state anyway. Prior to granting a comprehensive permit, this number 4 just talks about two documents in particular, about the regulatory agreement and the affirmative marketing plan, the affordable housing affirmative marketing plan. That is just essentially calling out the sort of standard form documents that are associated with the affordable housing units. And so the suggestion here was that those documents be made available during the permitting process and referred to with enough clarity so that there isn't ambiguity or debate later on. Particularly, the board had noted in terms of local preference, so that those things aren't missed in those agreements, and later on that they're sort of memorialized and agreed to now, given that they're sort of typically expected for a project like this. They shouldn't be hard to create. So then we go into site two sections. One's related to site design, and the other one's related to sort of architectural design. So site design number 5 talks about makes reference to the civil and stormwater review by Phil Christensen, who is the planning board's peer review consultant, and here was used by the ZBA as well. Planning board more often has site plans, and so we often see Phil more often. But at any rate, the comments that were given by Phil Christensen and also the city engineer suggest that there was additional work that needed to be done. In essence, was that there was a whole bunch of analysis that needed to be done more adequately than it was the initial submission was. So they were sent back to do that. They are expected, I think, by September 12th to return that information so our consultants can look at it. That will give the consultant, our consultant, a week to review and give its comments back to the planning board. So they'll have the benefit of the applicant's responses and then the peer review comments to see how far they've come to address those concerns, if everything or not. But here, this bullet basically just notes that there were some significant concerns noted in that stormwater analysis and that the applicant had some work to do, and that it's not 100% clear what the impacts might be to the wetlands across the street, given the drainage connection under the road. And so in this bullet, it also notes that the Conservation Commission, it's acknowledged that the Conservation Commission is presently reviewing the project because of it's actually located in the buffer zone to the resource area. It's across the street, but it's because it's in that 100-foot buffer zone there. So that's what that bullet is speaking to, essentially just saying that stormwater needs to be looked at.
Andy, may I ask, with a friendly 40B or a 40B, I should say, how much control does the conservation have over a project like this? Out of curiosity.
So the simple distinction is that the local ordinance, so there's a Wetlands Protection Act, that's a statewide one that applies everywhere essentially. They still have that review under the state statute. So where there might be a 100-foot buffer zone to the wetlands, but there isn't a required mandatory no disturb zone in the state Wetlands Protection Act. That is often adopted locally. So in this case, the mandatory 25-foot no disturb zone, although that's not an issue with this project, they're not getting close enough to do that. But in this case here, the local ordinance that was adopted, that is part of the consolidated ZBA review. So in essence, the ZBA is making the determination in lieu of the Conservation Commission whether or not that additional requirement, let's say in this case a 25-foot no disturb zone, should or should not be waived the way the Conservation Commission would consider whether or not to do that. Here, it's just because any local permits are consolidated through the Zoning Board of Appeals, and because that's a local ordinance as opposed to the state statute that the commission is looking at, the commission still reviews it and they are looking at it, but it's only under the WPA, the Wetlands Protection Act, not under the local ordinance as well.
So they can't circumvent the WPA, but
Correct.
But the zoning board could waive some of the additional requirements that our local conservation commission acts have in place.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
All right. That's fine. I'm good with the language.
So number 6, this is just this paragraph is a little bit longer, but it notes essentially that the A&R plan, which is part of the schematic plans that are before the ZBA, proposes to carve off a piece of the larger Port Plaza property to accommodate what's ostensibly the building footprint with a little bit of surrounding improvements. And it was suggested in this section here, which I think was a fair amount of, this is the remaining, some of the comments further down here, like this one, were parallel with comments we've seen elsewhere, and I think a notable piece of the planning board's discussion at the last meeting. It's suggested here that there's some connections around the remainder of the site that would be beneficial to tie in. And so where the red boundary that we see on the developer's plan, and I can just show that briefly for a second, just so everybody has that. But that red boundary is sort of, determined by the applicant essentially here. And because it does not, the quote unquote project is not including the driveway, so to speak, or on either side, it sort of plops the building down, the project itself, very close to all that, and doesn't necessarily leave room for a connection you might see with a sort of typical, streetscape or driveway, or, sort of safety bump outs and things with these islands that, sort of just dumps into the parking lot. So, so the suggestion here was just that, that line could be adjusted, I think, in part to allow some of those things to be addressed as part of the quote unquote project, as opposed to seeing the project sort of terminating just at the red line. So,
Andy, could you go back to the language?
yeah, sorry.
So what I would suggest on this, I think this is soft pedaling it a little bit. And I think instead of saying the applicant should consider amending the description of the development parcel, I think and even removing the words at this initial stage, I think it should say something more straightforward, like the applicant should expand the development parcel to include working, flying, see, to include all necessary parking, surface parking and circulation facilities, something like that.
Agreed.
Yep.
Yep,
Mm.
for sure.
I totally agree. There's no
Yeah.
way the parcel as they've defined it is acceptable at this stage.
Mhm.
And this is one as where we, as a planning board, I think we have particular latitude, right? We're still going to be approving the subdivision plan ultimately, right? So
Yeah,
will that also be done by the ZBA? Will the ZBA?
Well,
do
again,
that
it's
as well?
it's not that's one of the things that sort of brought up by looking one of the zoning board of appeals members had asked to see sort of the prior record of permits on the property, which covers subdivision and site plan approval. But that is a related question because the planning board here would be expected after this to only see what's called an approval not required plan, which is essentially just carving off that lot and saying there's enough frontage along Low Street to provide safe access to the lot.
Mhm.
So that's not really a discretionary determination by the planning board. That would be just sort of more of a procedural action by the planning board because it's dictated directly by the statute. Is there frontage or not? It's there on Low Street, so it's sufficient access. But it begs that sort of question about what's the relationship then to the driveway, and are there rights that have to be shared, between if the parcel is going to be broken off, between parties to make sure the driveway is serving both entities essentially or sites.
So then as a technical matter, does that mean the ZBA needs to have a finding that an A&R is the correct manner by which to subdivide the parcel?
Not that the A&R is the correct manner so much as that if there was any size limitations to the lot, for instance, that were deficient. There's nothing that comes to mind here. It's more the dimensional requirements for the building or the construction itself on the lot. But if this lot was like too small, for instance, that would be something the ZBA would be making a determination on now. And then the planning board would only be looking at that point of, is there ability to get, fire and, public access to the lot, for safe purposes. So again, the planning board's role here would be relatively small at the typical, just is there access to a lot versus the ZBA looking at all the dimensional things that go into a lot size, or in this case, mostly the building size.
So could I ask I guess a hypothetical question that the ZBA did its thing and the parcel didn't change at all, didn't get the necessary kind of rights off-site to have the parking it needs. We get an A&R plan, would we have any ability to deny that or request modifications to it?
I'm not immediately thinking of anything here where there'd be, there's nothing that stands out to me as sort of a key or reasonable basis for denying the sort of, contemplated A&R plan here, only because there's a limited question for the planning board, which is there a physical access to the lot that's safe? That has a whole bunch of case law established related to it that, it's relatively straightforward, I think. That's why it's not necessarily, all right, is it going to be a subdivision per se? That it doesn't seem to come with that path. So while they are reviewing the nature of the building on the lot in relation to that A&R plan, it's not in my view something that where they couldn't just come to you now and say, I'd like to break off that piece and call it a separate lot, and then work with that. I can see a path for that. The only issue I think that we see there today, for instance, is that part of the building, I think it's the Elements Massage, maybe. It's in that corner where the Radio Shack used to be. That corner of the building is basically going over the lot line. So the old Kmart building crosses connects and crosses the lot line and goes towards the Shaws. And so that part of the building is crossing a lot line. That's not something we would see, normally under zoning that way. So for instance, here, it's not that the lot can't be accessed, but there's dimensional relief necessary for the building they, want to, keep or reconstruct or sort of replace there. So,
Right, and the
so
A&R
I'm
plan
not sure if that helps to
won't even
clarify, but
necessarily
the
show the
planning board's role is
development.
relatively small. Sorry?
And the A&R plan actually won't even show the development, it'll just show the parcels, right? It won't even be.
Correct. I mean, we required them to show basic information about the existing lot, but it's not required to show any proposed development per se. It's
Right.
required to show that there's access to the lots essentially. Yeah.
Guys, I'm going to have to ring off, so something's come up. No big deal. I'll go over the materials later and check in. See ya.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, Jack.
Sorry, was Rick or anyone else, did you, other questions on 6 or concerns there? Okay.
Well, I
Uh,
guess I would just say, this is kind of a general statement about the size of the parcel. We're going to be getting into the actual circulation and parking issues later on in the memo,
Yeah.
correct?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, So 7 is open space and lot coverage calculations. I think Rick mentioned this that they're not actually on the numbers that you see in the table, for instance, aren't necessarily calculated the way that the zoning ordinance dictates they should be done. So and I'll defer to Rick and others on this, but I think the point here was just that if the board is considering this project, looking at it in terms of plans or granting waivers, the calculations essentially should reflect the ordinance and the project on the plans. So where rooftop open space might be shown or calculated as part of that ground level, essentially, should be reconciled in the numbers regardless of what's ultimately approved. And defer to Rick and others if I got that correctly. But
Yeah, I think that the key point here is that maybe the zoning board doesn't deal with the open space percentages the way the planning board does in site plan review. And, they might, if we didn't say something about this, they might be persuaded by the applicant's attorney who says that, regardless of what the zoning says, this works as open space. And I think whether it's functional as open space is different from whether it is legally open space. And so I think that we should, the waiver should show the extent of departure from the ordinance. Whether or not the waiver is good or bad, it should be kind of honest in what it's saying about how far it's departing from the
And I
zoning.
think as a board, relative to our, review of future projects, we should have a consistent point of view relative to this, consistent with the zoning ordinance. So I think raising it and asking that they correct the data for the project is absolutely the right thing to do.
okay, number 8. This is getting in. We're starting to talk about Low Street traffic entrance. So talking about the safety of the intersection, the traffic congestion that happens there, and some of the volume that's there today. And then there's in B, and that's an A and B, comments about the garage entrances being close to the street there, and then the sort of queuing and turning of vehicles and how that might cause additional congestion there. C is talking about the garage entrance and just not necessarily coordinated with one of the other drawing sheets. So it's some discrepancies. This comes up periodically, and obviously you want to have one consistent set of plans at the end of the day.
The only question I have on this, Andy, is I think relates to paragraph A, and I don't know how much discussion there has been about the existing traffic volume versus the expected traffic volume from this project, but I'm wondering how the other board members feel about being more specific about the fact that currently the Kmart project is not contributing any traffic to Low Street, to this intersection. So we're comparing the traffic generated by this 212 unit development to a site which currently is generating zero traffic volume. So I'm kind of remembering statements that may have been made in ZBA meetings about assessing this relative to the historic traffic volumes generated by Kmart versus the traffic volumes for the 212 unit development. I don't think that's an accurate way to look at this right now relative to the existing condition for the site.
I would add two things to that. I mean, I agree with you, but two additional points. One is that looking at historic traffic volumes, I don't think they've been looking at historic traffic volumes on Low Street. So what was the volume of through traffic on Low Street at the time Kmart was active? Is it has traffic on Low Street increased since then? And, if we were looking, what are the conditions what are the actual environmental conditions now compared to what they were looking at when Kmart was active? I think the other point, I'm not sure exactly how to phrase that, but the other point is that the character of residential traffic is different than the character of traffic going to retail stores, the hours and
point,
days and
yes.
everything. So I think that it's not just new traffic volume, it's new and different traffic volume, or different new traffic volume and different, you know, traffic hours, peaking patterns, whatever the verbiage is.
Just a question, just so I understand what might be added or tweaked here. If something's appropriate here. I don't know how familiar each member might be. Because there's been some traffic information, several sets of traffic information that have been posted to the open gov record from the applicant and then from the peer review consultant. So I don't know if you're familiar with the expectations of revised data, some of the exchange of that, backup data, and then the way the analysis was done, different times of day, for instance, things like that, prior Kmart use versus, other sort of present conditions and what data and whatnot, and the suggestions that were made by the traffic consultant TEC for some similar, driveway, entrance type improvements, things like that. So I don't know. I just wanted to make sure folks have seen that as well, because that will inform your comments or relate to your comments here.
I had a question about this one, Andy. I would think know the answer. Is there any concept of the use of the Kmart having been abandoned at this point, or is that?
Yeah, I mean, it's been Rick's earlier comment. I think sort of the question there: what's the appropriate reference point? Is it Kmart being open previously when it was full and active? Is it the present conditions that are there today? Is it looking at the whole plaza and Low Street? Was it the right time of day, for instance?
No, I mean, but just technically, I think the answer is probably no, it hasn't been abandoned, but I'm just curious if anyone's looked into that. Like, could someone go in there and reopen a Kmart today if they wanted to?
I don't think there's much of a concern there about sort of losing the right to keep a retail use in that space. There is that sort of, have you abandoned something for a couple of years, but I don't know what the extent to which they've pulled building permits or different things that have gone on in that building, to sort of, keep it up or maintain it. But there's probably some grounds for that to not have been abandoned without any question, from the way that that's typically interpreted and applied under the ordinances and the case law. So that doesn't, flag to me as a question, the abandoned use, so much as what is the right reference point for traffic, as a comparison, previous use when it was active versus today. That was brought up at least. So.
Well, I think that the data for the actual open use, being that it was now 8 years since it closed, and Kmart at its peak had a lot of traffic in and out of it, but the population is 20% higher in Newburyport than when Kmart was at its peak. So I think the data for the numbers is very skewed. It's hard to get a good number, so they have to go by what we have for real-time data as far as the queuing at the cycles, at the certain intersections and the peak times like 3 o'clock and such. It's really hard, I think, this far out to gauge what it would have been like peak since it's been abandoned for so long.
To me, the Kmart traffic, the historic traffic volume is kind of immaterial at this point.
Mhm.
Matt, I think that's kind of what you're saying.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if we want to say this directly as a board or not, but from my point of view, this new project should be looked at relative to the current existing condition on the site.
I agree.
It includes the current traffic volumes on Low Street. It includes the amount of traffic generated by this particular site, the empty Kmart building, which is really zero at this point. And now we're adding, the traffic generated by 212 residential units. And to Rick's point, the nature of that traffic is different than retail traffic. It has peak traffic flows in the morning, particularly, and to some degree later on in the day, at the end of the day, but it's very different from the way retail traffic behaves. So I think to me that the baseline for comparison is the current condition on the site. But I agree also that we should make a very clear statement that the nature of traffic generated by the residential development is very different from retail traffic generally.
Is the only entrance and exit on the left side, or what's that, north side of the building for the parking underneath? Is that
No.
how that's going to work? Or is it
North
also
end.
No, there's two.
East and west, I guess, if you want to call it that. But both ends of the building have parking access.
And I bring that up because I feel it kind of folds into what we're talking about right now. It's a little bit of a different traffic pattern because normally you don't see people coming in and out of, again, I don't know what that is, east side of the building. That's more for deliveries now, right? But
Yeah.
there's going to be an increase of traffic flow over there. So I don't know if that's helpful or hurtful, or if they could set up a
That's a
state
good point.
area.
That's an
example.
excellent point, Charlie, because the TEC, the most recent report indicates that they encourage use of that east side more
That's
or
right.
equal to the west side one for that very reason.
That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
So maybe we
That,
make
and all of that is the traffic that's generated by this new project, which should be assessed in a traffic study. You know, I agree that the traffic is maybe distributed here between these two entrances. That's fine, but it still needs to be looked at in terms of an overall traffic study and its impacts on the intersection at Low Street, which may be signalized, how it impacts traffic, you know, in general on Low Street. If people are coming out of that other entrance on the east end and taking a left turn and going the other way on Low Street, then you know you've got an interesting traffic situation there as well. So all of that should be addressed in the traffic study. My only point is that should be looked at, and the existing condition that they should be talking about is the current condition, which is the traffic on Low Street and the traffic that's generated by this site currently, which is zero.
Well, so one of my thoughts is, I don't know how much influence we have over this, or something that we would consider to maybe guide them, and especially from people who live in the area, and we know how the traffic works over there with Hajis trying to get out. I'm always trying to run out of China Walk as fast as I can, and it's really hard to get in and out. But if we encourage them to use, am I saying this right? If I'm facing it's the east side of the building, closer to, like, the Knock Mullen, right? One, the thought of, say, a traffic signal there, okay, and staging or whatever, and encouraging, or maybe even insisting that the outflow of the residents has to come from the east side of the building, utilize a traffic signal to the east side of the building, which would stave off some of the excess traffic patterns, I'm thinking, because a lot of people try to turn left into the plaza. That's not going to change, right? And so I just see a lot of a big conundrum of traffic and congested across the Hodges area. And the more I look at this, it's just going to be a little bit of a nightmare, in my opinion. And Rick's right. The traffic pattern is going to be really heavy, 8 to 9:30 in the morning, and then maybe again, 4:30 to 6 when Matt gets home.
I would argue that definitely we've discussed the signal is a given, that it's necessary, but alternatively, I would like the city to look at a roundabout instead, and pedestrian signal away from the roundabout. And the roundabout is a preferred method for transportation planners to slow and stop queuing, and it keeps traffic moving. It's also less maintenance long-term for the city, having to monitor the cycle of the actual signal and also the electrical costs associated with it. The problem with this particular project is there's not a lot of real estate, so there would be some taking involved in that. And that's a sore subject, because they already want the city to pay half the cost of the signal installation and then be responsible for the signal for the rest of its life. I would argue this would be an area that maybe we should explore a roundabout as possible, if we could, and then do a separate pedestrian crosswalk with a pedestrian signal only, off away from a safe distance from the roundabout. And then I would also go so far as to suggest that the west entry by China Walk is a right turn only and a right turn in, no left turns in or out. And then that east entry, where obviously the delivery and the access to the garage, is a left turn in and a left turn out with no signal. Any thoughts?
I hear what you're saying, Matt. My only concern is that we're not traffic engineers.
Correct.
And relative to this first bullet point, we're trying to identify, the sort of baseline for assessing this and raise the concern that this type of traffic for this type of project is different than retail.
Mhm.
I would hesitate to get into proposing specific solutions for the traffic. That's for the traffic engineers to figure out. What we're saying here is we want you to consider the information in this way, the existing
Yes.
condition in this way, and we want you to remind you that the traffic is residential traffic, not retail traffic. Beyond that, I'm not sure we want to get into proposing specific solutions for these intersections because I don't think we have the expertise to do it. I know I don't.
I agree with the general
Right this
notion.
minute. I'm kidding. Maybe say traffic pattern there.
Sorry, residential traffic patterns.
Yeah, at the end.
Oh, sorry, patterns. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Whatever you guys want to do on that, I'm fine.
I kind of agree with Bob in terms of the question of intersection versus roundabout and not being able to design things. I do think that we're going to want to say something about signalization, which is a specific thing, and that's one of the sticking points. And I assume that's coming up later, but that signalization is warranted and should be implemented as part of this project. I think that should be a strong statement.
Sorry, just that the signal. You want that, Rick? Is that what you're suggesting?
I think you're talking about that somewhere else, right?
Suggest
believe
that
it's written.
intersection be signalized.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry. It's a good point
If
because
it's
I
not,
feel
then
like,
just put it in.
is it addressed? I guess not.
I
Okay.
think
I don't think it is.
that was one of the things that I know there's some kind of disagreement, and the developer wants to do quote fair share end quote contribution. I'm afraid that if that happens, it's never going to happen because the city won't come up with its funds. So I think we need to say that signalization is required for safety purposes. And I think Tech said that. But
Yes.
we should support that.
All right, I'll use this.
And for our own record, I do like what Matt's suggesting about only left, only right, depending on the inflow and outflow. It'll make a big difference. It'll make people think about whether or not to go down Low Street.
I don't think you can have three intersections that can all go left and right in such a busy area. I think you have to have at least one of them a right and right and a right only, preferably that west one, because it is such a blind turn anyway as it is. It's a tough location. That turn is very difficult as it is now. The east side will have to have full access because of deliveries, cut throughs, people going, cyclists will come in and out of there. That central one is the primary focus of they feel no matter what is done with this project, that central entrance and exit will see at least 2/3 to 3/4 of the volume of that entire housing facility based on its location being central.
I think that there was a discussion at a previous meeting about potentially shifting that central driveway a little bit to the west and potentially closing off the west driveway altogether. I don't recall the specifics, but I think that came up, and that again, I agree that west driveway should probably be only right in, right out, but I guess the question is whether it's still needed. I think that was raised in a memo at some point, I believe.
All right.
Is there anything in terms of the language of this that was missing that someone feels like should be added or I didn't capture correctly, or I was trying to follow with all the suggestions and comments and sort of weave in together as best, but
I think we got it. You guys think that?
Yeah, I think it's all right.
All right,
I
so
guess I guess I would just go back to the signalization question and
Yeah.
and I would want to look at our recommendations compared to what Tech said, because here it feels like it's tagged on to the end of another paragraph. And if it would feel different if we said, if we had a separate paragraph, a separate item about that. I'm not sure
Like D? Just say
yeah, I mean,
D.
like right now you've got item C, you have something specific about, well, maybe item B, I guess, where you say consider relocation further, where you're talking specifically about entrances and exits and how to change that. A is more like a general statement about traffic volumes and patterns, and it isn't specific to the driveway entrance. So I thought there should be something about a specific bullet about the driveway entrance, and I don't know whether you have one later on or not, but that intersection of the main driveway with Low Street deserves its own bullet.
Well, if I'm not missing something, the TEC comments did suggest there was a more recent letter that the ZBA had gotten right before the day before, or the morning of, I guess, the ZBA meeting, which I think included, more particularly had suggested this same, piece here about a signalization or controlled intersection there. So I don't know if it addresses your concern to just sort of tag on to that, as suggested in the TEC, peer review letter or something like that. But it does seem to me that that's consistent with something that TEC had suggested be done here.
Andy, why don't we start by making that last sentence item B, paragraph B,
Okay.
and just add that, and then B will change to C, C will change to D. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, as Rick is saying, now we've made that clear statement, which is a detailed statement about the intersection, and is followed by detailed statements about the garage entrances.
Yeah.
Paragraph A is more of a general, comment about things.
Yeah.
Of this central driveway entrance, we want to add that in, the central driveway
Yeah.
entrance at Low Street on B.
Yeah, I think it's worth just,
Yeah.
it should be obvious enough, but yeah.
The TEC report is very thorough. I read through it and I agree with just about every aspect of it. I think there's some excellent recommendations there so far.
Yeah, and just to my knowledge, and 100% agree with the comments and the discussion here. To my knowledge, although the comments, they've seen the more recent comments from TC. To my understanding, there still is an indication that they're interested in doing these improvements. But obviously, this is the focal point for everybody, given as you're all discussing here. So.
Yeah, they also raised some excellent points about the rest of the plaza and the access. A lot of the things that we discussed at our last meeting about how there's tons of room for improvement there too.
Right.
I would also, I'm just kind of trying to leaf through the tech report, the most recent one, and they specifically call out this statement about fair share and say it's peculiar because the traffic signal is basically required for this development. So I think that we could strengthen our statement by kind of referring to the tech report.
Yeah. Okay.
Nine gets into some of the similar sort of pedestrian level improvements that, where it was discussed earlier by some of the members, just the fact that the building kind of fills the proposed lot. And so there's not much site to work with to integrate. And so just, comments on some of that.
I agree with 9.
It overlaps with comments from TC. They had a sketch map that they attached their most recent letter, sketching out how they thought, there's various different varieties or variations of a theme, but they had basically sketched out how some of the end islands of the parking bays could be, closed off or connected or adjusted, for instance, where sort of walkways or sidewalk connections could be better made, and some reconfiguration of parking spaces. And I would suggest that that's the perfect layout per se, but it suggested that there's some alternatives that could be done that are beneficial to the connectivity of this particular building to the remainder of the site in the area. So.
Again, I think this relates to those surface handicap parking spaces as well as the internal handicap spaces. And I think that I don't know whether it would be helpful either as part of this paragraph or somewhere else to talk about making sure that handicap spaces that serve the development are adjacent to the development, not across the street.
Yeah, I think that is, I feel like for some reason we captured that in one of these bullets, but
It's, yeah, it is.
it is in there somewhere. I know we had that comment. Oh, it was on the enlarging the parcel, the so to speak. It was in the
That kind of implied it, but I'm not sure that it actually said, does it actually say that?
any off-site parking spaces dedicated to the project. So here, those are the ones that you're not are commenting on are, according to them, those are off-site because they're, to your point, in the Shaw's parking lot, not in the.
Right, I guess what I'm saying is it doesn't say put the handicap spaces next to the building. And, they're right across, they're across the street from the building right now. So I think this is, the intent of it is here. It's not really, I think this may go into the
So
site.
why
Do you
don't
want
we
to put-
add that
you want to-
specific statement? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, you want to back up there in the.
Well, the
No, down where you were.
item 8 is about the size of the parcel. I think when you get that, or item 6 or whatever it is. I
Yeah,
think
yeah. So
you need
you want
to-
it in which one?
I think
Sorry.
it should have to do, we're down where we were talking before, down at the bottom, down below.
Okay, so down here.
Maybe in this section between 9 and
9,
10, there
yeah.
should be something about making sure that anything needed to serve the building is including handicap parking spaces, are adjacent to the building. Basically what they're trying to do is they're trying to avoid changing the circulatory layout adjacent to
Right.
that driveway. And I'm not sure they can get away with that and still have a decent project.
They've to satisfy the mass access board, they'd have to demonstrate an accessible route.
Yeah, this is quite obviously not, I think, I haven't heard from the accessibilities coordinator for the city, but as the assistant building inspector, but I'm confident that this is already an issue under the building code, so the accessible nature of it, so.
Yeah,
TC had commented that they could actually flip, to the earlier suggestion that Rick had made about the driveway where it meets Low Street, if that driveway entrance was that, even shifted, a bit, the same thing, for instance, could be done. I'm not necessarily suggesting that to be done here, but if that was done on the parking bays where the Shaw's is, on that side of the proposed building, that would allow the parking space to be up against the building. And so, you'd have a sidewalk there along the building frontage and then parking spaces there as opposed to having to cross the driveway entirely to get to any parking. So that could be where some of those spaces go.
Yeah, to Jamie's point, I don't think that, I might be wrong, but I don't think that a route from one lot to another lot without going to a public way is an accessible route. I might be wrong about that, but
Yeah, it stuck out to me as something that might be just from a basic, state accessibility requirements wouldn't make sense. Never mind, local site plan review. So, was there anything else we missed in 9? So enough, 10 and 11, both dealing with a little bit of sidewalk and street tree standards. And again, consistency between the plans. So,
Were we suggesting a more westerly alignment of that main road away from the building to accommodate a wider entry into the parking garage and maybe a little bit further out? I know that was the discussion we had briefly. Rick was bringing it up last week, like, maybe move that center entrance to the west a little bit entirely to have some more room to work with. It's very close to the structure as it stands.
yeah, I think that we talked about, there are a couple of options. One is to do that, to shift the driveway west. The other would be to somehow insert the garage doors further into the building, but
Mm,
to deal with to move the driveway
further north.
move the driveway north, which increases the slope. So then you'd have
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
indent the driveway under the building more, which loses parking spaces. So it's a tough balancing act. It's just that they're trying to get a lot of stuff into that space. At the very least, I think that the drive, and I think we've already said that, right? Move the garage entrance north.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
earlier in the letter. Yeah, okay.
So a more westerly alignment of the roadway potentially could offset the change in slope, but they would definitely be losing a lot more parking on those west shops.
Yep.
Yeah. It's already a tight entry between the corners of the buildings too, with the plans as it is, that proposed structure on the existing west shops. There's actually not a lot of room between them at that edge, that corner already.
So I'm not hearing, if I'm not mistaken, I'm not hearing 100% confidence in the idea of including a suggestion that the primary driveway be shifted per se. It's more sort of up in the air. There's pros and cons, or is that something that we should add here in maybe perhaps an earlier?
I think when we talk
Traffic view.
about solutions related to the garage entrance, we could say that, you know, regrading of that entrance drive or relocation of that entrance drive further to the west could be considered
Solution.
as part of that solution.
Right. I think that, yeah, again, you're right that we can't come up with a solution ourselves. But I think if we identify moving that garage entrance further north away from Low Street, and there are a number of ways to deal with that, one of which could be shifting the driveway
Yeah,
west.
I think we could say they could consider those as options.
That sounds good.
Could also be considered.
Oh, okay, could also be.
To allow for transition into a relocated garage entrance.
I can scroll up or down, but anything we missed in there? We'll go back down to where we were here, I think. So we're just on these two. All
So
right, how about-
we're just trying to reference, you know, if we're suggesting a standard sidewalk and street tree detail, just trying to reference something that exists now in the zoning ordinance that they could look at, and the most logical example is the smart growth district. So just referencing that as you know, a possible template for, you know, the public realm on the project.
So are we not setting any standards here at all? We're not saying 5-foot sidewalks with 5 foot with, you know, some kind of.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, we could say, you know, for example, you know, minimum sidewalk width of, or something like that, if that's what you want to call it some specifics.
So I had suggested, and I'm not saying this is necessarily the correct thing, but I think I had suggested 5-foot sidewalks and 5-foot bike lanes along the property frontage. And then there's the question of what happens in terms of a tree belt in that area.
I mean,
Okay, yeah.
on
Do you
the
want, how are you, sorry, go ahead.
on number 11, the inconsistencies of the plans, it would seem that as if that some of the plans show the existing trees, which are mature, on the actual property as being left there, but I don't see any way that they could do a project of this scale and maintain the integrity of those same trees. But there's a nice row of mature trees not far from the sidewalk right now. But,
Yeah, that I don't see that. I think that's more just calling out a discrepancy in plans because to your point, it's not feasible to.
yeah,
Yeah.
which is a shame because they are all in great health all the way down the whole row. But yeah, they will infringe on the site boundaries. Yeah, I think that the city would probably be best to propose trees in between the sidewalk and street in consistency with the current tree plan.
I think the current landscape plan that they've submitted doesn't really address street trees particularly at all. Some of the architectural plans, as you're saying, Matt, show trees, some of which may be existing. But I think we want to say, there needs to be a standard for sidewalks that could work as we expand and look at this overall district. And I'm fine with 5 feet as a minimum, but we also need street trees, which means there's a landscape zone, a planting zone between that pedestrian 5-foot zone and the curb and the street. And then to Rick's point, if we want to also address bike lanes, that would happen, I guess, outside of the curb, Rick, in the street.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So
TEC suggested also looking into the possibility of a separate shared use path. It doesn't sound like this particular site plan will be able to accommodate that, but it's something that's worth looking into as well, like a typical shared use path that would be two-way on one side of the street too, that could possibly connect to a future extension of it. But that's obviously complicates the project and we don't know if that'll go that direction.
the baseline for me in this is we have said above that we think you need streets and sidewalks on two sides of this project.
Correct.
So then I think we need to identify the appropriate character of the sidewalk environment. The width of the sidewalk, the fact that sidewalk environment should include street trees. We talk about street lights in one of the next paragraphs. But we want to talk about the character of the sidewalks then that we are recommending that they include around the perimeter of the project. So the reference here, and I guess I want to just address whether this is the appropriate reference as a starting point. Should we say that the smart growth district is where those appropriate standards are already established?
Yes.
So
I don't think you necessarily have to limit yourself to that, and I think you could use it as an example, but I think it's helpful in the context of 40B and other related case law, just because it's an established ordinance. It's something already where projects have been permitted, and
Yeah.
that works.
Yeah.
And it's an as-of-right permit process. So I think it does make a lot of sense to use it, even if it's just an example.
So I don't know what those standards are. I mean, I guess when you look at their plans and they have, as somebody mentioned, they have no street trees. All their trees are on private property, and their sidewalk is abutting the curb. I don't know how that relates to what would be allowed in the smart growth district. You go down Boston Way, and there are places where what they have on this plan might work. So I don't know whether when 1 Boston Way was permitted, whether the planning board granted waivers from its standards or whether that met the standards. So
Yeah,
I just,
As I recall, there might have been like one or two minor ones in the site level standards being waived there, but I guess to your point, I was just trying to add a couple of phrases there just to kind of, to your point, just kind of nuance, recognizing the fact that this might be an example of places where best practices are found, but it's not the full extent of, or we might think of other, like it might be 6 feet, for us moving forward versus a 5 feet reference we had previously. So to your point, maybe we just say, sidewalk design should consider best practices. Sidewalk design should consider best practices, such as those already established in the Newburyport zoning under the smart growth district, as opposed to kind of, suggesting that that's the only, what they find in that section is the only set of, standards. So.
and if you include accommodation for adjacent tree planting strips, I would clarify it by saying between the sidewalk and the street. That's
Okay.
Yeah. Major food sidewalks about Charlotte Brothers. This is just language in here, but effort should be made to include sidewalks and bike lanes surrounding the proposed project and abutting driveways, both of which should have minimum width of 5 feet. Okay. I think that gets us there.
And for number
So
11,
should we go to, sorry?
I was gonna say for number 11.
Yeah.
You could even be more specific to say that the architectural plan shows street trees and the landscape plan doesn't. So, we should make sure that it isn't that they're just inconsistent. The landscape plan doesn't show any street trees.
Yeah.
Does that capture what we're talking about?
Well, I guess it's more than that. Is that the architectural drawings show street trees, and the landscape plan shows trees that are not street trees that are on private property. So, it's not that.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I gotcha.
So I would say the plan should, it goes back to that previous statement in number 10, the last statement about accommodation for adjacent tree planting strips. And maybe you want to combine that phrase with this one. It's kind of hard to draft it on the fly, but. Okay.
Does that capture,
Versus should have the second E in versus should be U.
oh,
The S period. There you go.
They're proposed, in which,
sorry, long day.
yeah, okay.
Do we go to 12 or?
Yeah. The lighting is really undefined. Both street lighting and lighting that might be mounted on the building or focused on the building somehow. It's just not defined yet at all.
And we don't want the lighting consistent with a plaza.
I think 12, 13, sorry, is pretty self-explanatory.
So let me just pause there for a second.
Yeah.
And I can't remember what the monument sign looks like. Is this,
It's only shown in their renderings.
And the
Yeah.
entranceway.
It's not on the plans. It's not on the landscape plan. It's only shown in the renderings. Yeah, you can see it right there.
And then there's another one at the circle
that
at
could be,
the front.
that could be a block to visual, for cars coming out, looking for cars coming down the
Right.
street. Yeah, I agree.
Any comments on the sign on the side of the building that they have proposed in that architectural? That's not a monument sign, but it's a pretty large sign on the corner of the structure.
Sorry, say again? What?
Any comments from the board on the sign that they have on the actual building on the corner, on the north
Oh.
and west quadrant? That's in the plans, is that anything that we comment on, or
Is
it's
the
not a
vertical
monument?
vertical
Yeah,
one?
yeah, the vertical.
Yeah.
Just curious what the board thinks on that one.
Can I see that?
Yeah,
Sorry, I'm just trying to see if I can find that one.
Try to make more work for you, Andy.
No, no worries. I just usually I try to have everything. Oh, here we go. Not sure if this is the exact one you're thinking of, but here's one. There might be another one I think in the other corner.
Yeah, that's the one right there. Yep.
I have no particular issue with it myself, but we can obviously talk about whether it complies with the zoning and all that kind of stuff, but I don't have any issue with it from a conceptual perspective. But
So if we're saying that the monument, that the sign ordinance should be complied with for the monument sign, I guess the question, you're right, the question is, does this comply also?
Mhm.
Or is that a waiver from the zoning ordinance? Are they submitting that as part of their application? In their architectural, and do they have any sign package at all?
haven't seen any of this in the architectural drawings. It just shows up in the renderings.
just the renderings,
Mhm.
yeah.
Where, I guess I'm concerned that if something's in the rendering and it's not in a plan, are we approving that? I mean, is the zoning board approving that rendering?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's an argument here that deference is given to the approval of whatever is presented there. It might be the additive in that case, but that would just be a starting point, given the 40B context. But at the same time, to your point, that's why you've commented before about consistency between plans and and things like that, because obviously we all want to know what we're expecting to see down the road. And so if something shows up on a drawing sheet where you might not expect it, for instance, and it's there, and then it shows up in the field, and yeah. So.
Do
I guess
we
my
want to
point is-
make that statement that in general, signage depicted in architectural renderings is not described in any specific detail in the architectural plans, and should be reviewed relative to the city's signage regulations?
Yeah, definitely.
I think we take out proposed, right, Rick? Because irrespective of the date of adoption, I think and all that nonsense, I think it's pretty.
Yeah.
Would make more sense to just say city signage regulations.
Yep.
At this point.
I defer to Charlie on that question. What do you, from the legal standpoint, with the proposed and the date of application, are they consistent with the current regulations?
Well, so there's very strict signage regulations in Newburyport that everybody has to apply for anyhow. So I feel like I don't know what kind of input they're going to listen to from us.
Mm.
But the comprehensive permit is going to they won't be going back to the zoning board for a sign permit, right?
But I thought they had to go through City Hall for the signage. No.
This is the
Yeah,
sign-
so just to be clear, that the typical process is that's reviewed through the zoning administrator, effectively, the billing office and the zoning administrator, for compliance with that section of the ordinance.
But in this case,
In this case, the ZBA would be effectively approving in advance whatever, scope of allowance for signage is in there. So to Rick's point, so.
So they
So
potentially
then-
could waive the signage.
Yeah, they could waive
City
through
Hall
this.
would
So to
have
Rick's earlier
purview.
question, if the signs shown on the plans here, or the renderings even, and they're not consistent with the zoning regulations, the presumption here is that that's being mechanically waived by the ZBA as part of this approval, which is why, of course, there's always an examination to see, right, or is every waiver that's required for this project actually properly listed in the waivers list that they've, submitted, things like that. So,
Mhm.
Could we,
I think I have the waiver list here. Hold on.
yeah, I wouldn't necessarily rely upon that waiver list, sort of like a
Okay.
couple of pages in there for that particular purpose. I think it's too fine a grain, I think, to see in there. And I certainly recognize you could have a lengthy table further in the applicant's materials identifying all these points, and you're all right to identify them. I tend not to, pause on each of those smaller points. I think you're covering the ground sufficiently, in my view, if you cover the main points here, which is, consistency with the regulations and, sight lines and things like that, rather than, having to go into that finer grain and debate whether it meets every provision that's in those sections, and recognizing here that it's actually the ZBA that's going to determine at the end of the day whether any of those things are reasonably acceptable. So it might be more important that you call out things that you find unacceptable or things that you think should be adhered to, rather than every, provision being complied with, so to speak.
Okay.
And what if we eliminate the second sentence?
Yeah, I was just thinking
Kind of
that.
repetitive with the first, and
Yeah, I was thinking
say-
of modifying that to a different piece. Rick had mentioned.
could we
Yeah.
say materials and details for signage are not called out in the current architectural drawings?
Not specified.
Specified, called out, specified, yeah, specified is fine.
Mm.
Well, it is the architectural renderings, right?
Well, architectural drawings, that's where you would actually see materials and
Yeah,
details.
okay.
I mean, they call
So
out
renderings,
exterior
but not the
materials and specifics on the architectural drawings, but they're silent on the signage details.
Mm.
So that's where you would see it.
Did we miss anything in that?
I think that's okay.
Looks good.
I think 14 seems pretty self-explanatory. But,
Mhm.
Then we get into building design, which is the remaining piece. So it goes on that it starts with 15 here. So this talks about the ground floor units. I think Bob and others mentioned this in the prior meeting, where it turns the corner and goes towards Shaw's. Seeing if they can do anything to make that more sort of quasi-public type space as opposed to residential stoops.
I had a question about whether, and I think we need to look at the plan, Andy, but whether or not these units are actually under the retail entrance canopies.
Oh, that's interesting. And
I
sorry,
think
hang
we
on a
just need
second.
to confirm that if we're going to say it.
Yeah. So when you say under,
The last residential unit is to the left of the egress stair.
yeah.
I'm not sure that's at a point where it's underneath the retail canopy.
Oh, I see. Sorry. Back to the
Mm.
letter. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
I would say no. I think it is outside of the retail
Yeah,
canopy.
I think we don't need to say that part
So
of
just this, we'll take this piece out here, right? So,
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But definitely some clarification as to what that area is going to look like from a public standpoint for the people that live within the building. It seems like they don't have a definitive plan as to access and the bike storage we talked about, and trash and emergency exits to the
It's
other
a-
side of the building. It seems like that's kind of just an afterthought area right now on the current plans.
It's a way to get to 212 units.
This is true.
If you put a building that size and if it's on the old Kmart leased area, that's what fits. So.
Yeah, the fine tuning after that, right?
So 16, is that we're going to 16?
Yeah.
I think that's pretty self-explanatory, but so 17, this is getting a little bit of sort of architectural design and massing, but it's suggesting that it could be broken down even with colors and textures. So,
And I'm fine if people have other points of view about this, that this is just me saying, that they actually, to create more perimeter, they have created these separate wings in the building which certainly helps with the overall massing, but then the application of materials doesn't consider that. It's kind of smeared generally over the building without differentiating one wing from another. So I'm just saying, you're kind of moving in the right direction with how you've considered the massing on the building, but the materials don't really reflect that.
I'll just say for myself, I take no issue myself with the sort of materials palette selection, so to speak, in that range. I defer you off. It didn't flag for me in sort of looking at the conceptual plan, something that sort of, bothered me, so to speak. But to your point, it's a long building. It's a larger building or footprint and extended one larger than we would see, approved here normally in Newburyport. So
Yeah.
pretty big. So
I think at the end of the day, it's essentially going to look a lot like Boston Way. Once all is said and done, they're going to be pretty similar and look from the outside.
certainly some similar facets, the panels and the sort of
Yeah.
this, element here, for instance, right? Sort of
Recess.
recess is a little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll go back to the letter. I don't know if you want to make tweaks to or additions to that area. I think Bob's captured it here from what I can tell. All right, so 18. It's talking about fiber cement board and using some other potential colors.
Yeah, I'm not arguing against fiber cement board because I understand there's a budget on this project and, it is what it is in terms of, materials like this, but fiber cement board comes in more colors than gray. And, I think, particularly if you look at the north side of the building, and you think about the view of this project across the the overall development and the view of this project from Story Avenue, over half of that very long elevation is gray fiber cement panels. And I'm not arguing with the material so much as I'm trying to suggest to them that again, maybe adding some more variety to that could help this elevation in some way.
You're looking to break it down more, irrespective of the right, just because it shows us like a large amount of that as a total surface area.
Yeah, I mean, as they got into, the elevation that extends down towards that retail that we were talking about a minute ago, they kind of lost the brick in the facade, and it's the rest of the facade is all cement panel.
Yeah, that
right.
retail
It
kind of
bleeds
bled
off
into
right
it.
there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Facade in the entry recess where the drop off is, a lot of that is also fiber cement panel. So there's a
In here.
lot
Yeah.
of that wall
Yeah.
that material.
Yeah.
Um,
Right there. Yeah.
So, yeah, so I guess how we word this statement is important. Because on top of what you're saying, Bob, what jumps out at me is there's a lot of stuff there that doesn't necessarily go together. I mean, what it ends up looking like is kind of almost a cheap thing with a bunch of brick pasted onto it to bring out some brick. So it's got
Yeah.
it's got that fiber cement. It's got I don't know what that is in those squares that are surrounded by brick that are separating groups of 4 windows. I don't know if that's fiber cement also, but it basically looks like there's kind of an underlayment with brick pasted onto it. And so it's not so much, I guess what I'm reacting to is the word more colors. It's not that I want more colors, is I want more of the nice colors. Yes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't think I
Yeah.
want to add more colors to this building.
No, they're definitely going for the
Again,
multi-building look.
I'm okay with that. I would hate to see all of this be a gray palette of material. You're muted, Rick.
Thank you. I wonder if what you're saying is that you want to add some color, some other color fiber cement to the gray, or whether you want to replace the gray with something else. It's not really clear from the way the statement is written.
I'm suggesting that they replace the gray with
Got it.
other colors.
I would go with that, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, are we saying, it seemed to me like his wording already captures it sufficiently, but maybe I'm missing something. Is there, you're looking for?
I think the wording could be interpreted to say, we'll replace some of the gray with a tan. And I think what I think we're agreeing on is, let's get rid of the gray and replace it with something that maybe looks more like a concrete or something like that, or, that has a different feel to it than the dark gray.
If different colors was replaced with an alternative to gray. So an alternative to gray should be considered
maybe take that sentence out. The different colors should be considered for such a large building.
Yeah.
Cut that out and put it at the end of the paragraph. And then we can it might say, maybe say a different color should be considered. Would that make sense, Bob, to you, to say a different color should be considered? Or I'm not
Yeah.
sure what you're trying to get at here.
I mean, fundamentally, I want to say that they should replace some of the gray panels with an alternate color.
Is that, this should capture it now.
You want to specify that northeast quadrant where it's predominantly like silver gray at the retail end?
Sorry, what are you saying, Matt, about this piece?
Do we want to specify? It seems like geographically, one of the locations that we have the biggest concern with is that blob of silver gray, not even the dark gray, the silver gray on the plaza side, where it looks like the plaza kind of just bled into it. And it's just that whole section of residential is that one color. That seems to be one of the biggest problem areas we have as far as this. Do we want to specify that specific location when we discuss possible change of colors there? Because the rest of the development seems to be somewhat consistent. That seems to be one of the biggest areas of like, we just got a big gray panel here.
And I agree with the sentiment that there's enough variety of color already. It's just better colors instead of more colors.
Yes.
Does
Do you
that
want to
capture
say a different color should be considered for such a large building, rather than the gray panels?
Well, too, we also want to clarify there are two different color gray in this design. The darker gray is less obtrusive, and it's more modern looking. Obviously, that kind of silver gray, the titanium gray, it looks like it basically is just leftover panels from the Shaw side, but that overwhelms that corner where it just kind of sits with no delineation. There's no differences there. So that's one of the areas I think that we have to maybe hone in on, as like that should be an area that should be adjusted to.
This is where it gets very subjective, because I sort of have the opposite point of view, which is I really don't like the amount of dark gray that's on this building. I know what you're talking about, Matt, and there are places where that can feel more contemporary, and some of this is actually a gray clapboard kind of detail, which the clapboard detail I don't particularly object to, but you see that dark gray on so many projects now, and in a limited, if used in a limited way, I don't really have a problem with it particularly, but there's so much of it here, and
I agree.
I just think that it becomes kind of an overwhelming.
And Bob, I don't suggest putting more of that on. I feel like the amount of that in this particular project in general is not too excessive. I think it's used for depth, and that is why it's in some of the recessed areas, and it's good for that. I don't suggest changing that section down by the old Radio Shack to that color. I suggest maybe going more brick color down there. And if definitely if you want to limit the grays for sure, but more so than titanium gray because there's just such a big section of it on that side.
Yeah, right. I'm just reading this one more time. Rather than a different color, Andy, can we say alternate colors should be considered for such a large building in lieu of the gray panels?
Anyone else see adjustments in that one?
No, that's not design's not my forte. I'm going to defer to you guys.
All right. 19, clear glass should be used as storefront locations. That should seem obvious enough, but it's come up in downtown once or twice. So
So it just to clarify that all of the residential unit windows are PVC and the storefront locations are an aluminum storefront system. So I'm using the word storefront here to identify those ground floor conditions where they're using the aluminum storefront system, and that's where they should have clear glass.
Okay.
uh, 20, a roof plan just to identify mechanical equipment. We just talked about this on Merrimack Street, so not atypical as in a concern. So just flagging for the ZBA, they might want to get some idea of what's up on the roof and whether there's step back from the edge of the roof or things like that. So.
And I think the reality of this is, I mean, there was a good solution for this on Merrimack Street, which is, most of this stuff is not on the roof, it's on the back wall. If you
Right.
look at the Boston Place projects and look at all of those units that are on the roof, that's what we're talking about here. And, the question is, and again, part of this is the view of this project as you look down the hill from Story Avenue. Do we want to look at all of that stuff on the roof, or do we want to suggest that there should be screening provided related to that? Because there will be a lot of stuff on this roof.
So two things to add to that. Should we be specifically saying that a view of the building from some direction, from further away that's going to show that should be provided? Like these renderings are all pretty close up and we don't have a rendering from a distance. I'm just wondering.
That's a
whether
good
that would be
idea,
helpful.
Rick.
And then the second thing is, and I can't remember whether this came up in Newburyport or somewhere else, but what about if they find the need to punch little holes in the side of the building for ventilation? I've seen that happen after the plan was approved, where they said, well, actually these units they can't all be ventilated through the roof, they have to be ventilated through the side of the building. So you no longer have this flat surface. Is there some way that we can be, first of all, for those of you who are involved in the building design, is that something that is something to worry about? It may not be something to worry about.
It absolutely is. In fact, if they have washer dryers in the units, which I bet they will, they're going to have what people in the apartment industry calls facade acne, where there's just like at least a couple penetrations per unit on the elevation.
There will be.
Jamie, are there chases that they could, send out from each unit, or is that too challenging given?
It's super challenging because then they have to have fire
Right.
breaks. It adds a ton of costs, and very few developers.
They're with the vents for dryers and things like that, toilet exhaust, things like that. They're going to go right through the sidewall.
Yeah.
So should those be shown in the plan on the renderings and plans?
Yeah, I think they should. It's a really good point.
Because the building's not gonna look like this if that's what happens.
No, you're absolutely right.
All right, did I capture that sufficiently with this?
Yep, that sounds good.
That was our last bullet in there, so I don't know if anybody felt like things are missing, but
I would make that last sentence, Andy, a different bullet point because there's,
Right.
you know, there's the roof plan and then there's the building
Yeah.
elevations that don't
Yeah.
show all of the penetrations that will be required.
yeah.
When you say verify at this time, should it say the plans should show
Mm.
instead
Yeah,
of
yeah, yeah.
yeah, just get everything from just replace the applicant's design team should verify at this time, just say the plans should show.
Yeah. Would you go as far as saying the developer should take a keen interest in making sure that they use whatever modern technology to reduce, the exterior
Yeah,
utilities?
yeah.
They won't.
There's
Unfortunately,
that.
I hear what you're saying, and I absolutely agree with you, but
Mhm.
just look at residential projects like this around, and you're going to see this stuff on the sidewall on every single one of them.
Yeah.
As you know, as Jamie's saying, there's no cost-effective solution to take this stuff vertically up through the roof. And so you just put a wall cap on, and you exhaust everything out the side wall, and it's just and in 50 to 60% of the units, it looks like a repetitive, thought out location, and everything, you can sort of accept that it is what it is. And then the rest of those units, it doesn't land in the right place because of the
Wow.
layout, because of how it relates to the facade. And there's always a bunch of these things that you wish could just be somewhere else, and they're not. And with a building with this much complexity and ins and outs and inside corners and everything, they're not going to land in a logical place every time, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's much we can do about it other than to ask them to show it so that the ZBA understands clearly what it is we're talking about here in terms of the reality of this thing.
And you can't insist on laundry facilities in various locations in the building, right?
No.
I think that's a little too particular for the 40B process for the ZBA to be dictating that, but it's worth noting, I guess, just for context, the applicant had also amongst the waivers asked for a waiver of Chapter 5 of the city's general regulations, not zoning, but general. That section includes the what's referred to as now the specialized code as opposed to the stretch energy code it was called previously. And it's sort of a progressive energy efficiency, essentially sort of upgrade to the basic state, threshold. It was adopted here locally, and so although we don't have, I had asked Attorney Mead to clarify what in that section specifically they're looking for waivers from, because it just lists Chapter 5 without any further identification of subsections that they think are at issue. So because that section is relatively new and wasn't sure if that was clear enough, to what extent that was included in there, I asked her to clarify. Still waiting for a response on that. But just wanted to note here, because it seems like that might be related to one way or another, the sort of mechanicals, the insulation, design of the building and so forth. I don't know, because it's a relatively new code, whether or not the architectural team is spending time trying to sort through the implications one way or the other about those things and how it might overlap with some of these things.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Do we have Bob's name correctly spelled down below?
Yeah. Did we miss anything?
Rick? Rick?
It's good to me.
So I just put as the CCs, I suggested obviously the mayor, city council, and just obviously his context, and Lisa Mead, who's the attorney representative for the applicant. They're going to see that as part of the public record when it's uploaded to OpenGov anyway, which is the placement for all the public comments and whatnot, as well as the applicant's submission.
Okay.
So did we get everything for now? I mean, you could have further comments before they wrap up permitting for the project, but sooner they have this for consideration, the better, because one way or another, whatever is done or not, they'll have it in mind. So,
That was pretty good.
all right. And to defer to you guys, do you want to just authorize the chair to sign the letter? It says amended this evening, obviously, but sign the letter and get it off to the ZBA?
So is it a motion or do we just?
Yeah, do we want to do a motion related to that?
I'd suggest a motion just because of formality that you are intentionally authorizing the chair to sign that on behalf of the board as a body. That's all. It's my,
Do we have a quorum?
we're good. Yeah. One.
1, 2, 3.
Is Matt able to vote?
Technically he's here when he's acting when there's a special permit, so to speak.
Let him vote.
No, I want him to. Don't get me wrong. I'm just.
I'm not sure, Frank. There's some areas that, of minutia. I'm not sure people are going to be debating to the end of time. So
I think in
Okay.
this case, it's not an application before us.
Yeah,
It's just
Okay.
general business, so I think you can vote.
Okay.
I agree.
Motion to allow draft letter to be submitted and signed by the chair.
I would like to second that. I'd also like to, as part of that, if we could, allow the chair and planning director to do any wordsmithing necessary
Hmm.
before.
Sure.
So it just have to be exactly.
Great.
sure. Thank you.
So we'll do this as a roll call vote. Charlie Palmisano,
Here, yes.
Jamie Pennington,
Yes.
Rick Tainter,
Yes.
Matt Heffron,
Yes.
and I am also a yes. So the motion passes.
So that's all we had for this evening. Although it's probably worth mentioning one other thing. If you had a moment, I'll just flag it for your consideration for a future meeting, really, but just to kind of put it on your radar. Otherwise, I didn't have anything else myself, Bob.
No, nothing else from me either.
I just wanted to note for the members, I'm just going to show you briefly on where something is on the website, just so you can find it. And it's because we were going to have it on a future agenda. I did discuss it with the Conservation Commission last night, actually. This is, I don't know if any of you are familiar with or have gone through the application process for a permit in the city, but a lot of the new permits, including obviously our land use permits, are accessed from the city website. We point to OpenGov as a platform, and in there is the repository for all the types of permits. Obviously, they're coming from the city website, but so if you follow that link, from planning board or one of the other boards or departments to the permits. In there is the different divisions building, you'll find, of course, the Historical Commission and Planning Board, you'll find your permit, applications there. But further down on the page, we have what we refer to as a test portal. And what I discussed with the commission last night, what we thought would make sense to get some feedback from the planning board members on as well is, I think Rick knows a little bit about this, but the resiliency checklist. So the idea being folks could, as perhaps as part of an application to either the Conservation Commission and or the planning board, for instance, take into account resiliency and sustainability measures in the review of those projects where applicants are asked to clarify, what they've done in certain areas, and the board can keep those things in mind. Obviously, there's a sort of, related discussion about what regulations are in play and is there something that the board can mandate or, is used as a guideline versus a standard or whatnot. But the goal here, I think, was to start to educate folks and to start making sure that these things are considered, at least in, in projects. So in essence, the Resiliency Committee had suggested that we roll out something like this. I don't want to add it to the time frame for tonight, obviously, because we didn't have it in there, but I wanted to mention for future meeting that our goal was to just, when we have a little bit of time at the tail end of a meeting like this, I'll check with Bob on that for the next upcoming meetings, but to just run through like we did for the Conservation Commission and just sort of step, through this and just kind of show you just a couple of the, it's not lengthy, but a couple of questions in there and really get your feedback as in essence as to whether or not you think this is something that should be rolled out as part of the application to the planning board. If so, for what, any scalability in terms of project size. any adjustments, things like that, before anything is like this is rolled out. In essence, the reason that, I mention it here is because the resiliency committee members and a subgroup was working on it. But obviously, if the suggestion is that one of the permitting boards or more than one of the permitting board use that as part of the application process for projects, that the boards themselves, those permanent bodies, should review, that sort of thing. We obviously are familiar with our existing application materials. So whether something's written in the ordinance or is in the application form, and any debate over what's appropriate there, it made sense that we sort of review that with you. So I just wanted to note that it's there if you want to take a peek. If you create an account, you got one already, you can just log in and do it. Just kind of experiment with it. Essentially, we're just trying to see how it looks and works according to that subcommittee's work, and just kind of get your feedback. Do you think it's helpful? Do you think it's not? Do you think there's something that could be tweaked or adjusted? Suggestion was made by a couple folks that it be sort of like a tool or resource available to people, but not necessarily a mandatory form that folks fill out. I'll leave it to you guys to give feedback, but I just wanted to note that it's there so you could come back to a future discussion, and perhaps if you've looked at it, see it in advance. So thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Nice.
Yeah. All right.
You take a look.
All set, Andy?
Yes, thank you.
I'll take a motion to adjourn the meeting then.
So moved.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Charlie, second. Okay, roll call vote again. Charlie Palmisano,
Yes.
Jamie Pennington,
Yes.
Rick Tainter,
Yes.
Matt Heffron,
Yes.
and I am a yes. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Take
night,
care.
everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you. See you.